I thought it was interesting, and that is that how many of you are grieving over Oprah having canceled her show and no longer on? How many of you are grieving? Okay, we have one person that needs counseling. But I heard on the radio yesterday that I guess they were selling tickets or giving away tickets for her final TV show, and this one woman, she wanted tickets really, really bad. She just loved Oprah. And so her husband had to work downtown in that area, and she asked him to get some tickets, get down there early, stand in line, get some tickets. And being a man, he forgot. Being a man, he didn't want to tell his wife he forgot. So he tore his clothes, and he dirtied himself up a little bit, and he took a rock and he bashed his head until it bled a little, and then he called the police and said he'd been mugged. And he thought, well, you know, I'd rather do that than go home and tell my wife that I just simply forgot because I'd had more than my head bashed. But then the police, when filling out the report, he finally, in a soft voice, admitted that he made it all up because he was so afraid of going home and telling her he'd just forgotten. Yep. He struck a blow for masculinity, didn't he? Isn't that great? Wow. How many of you guys would have done the same thing? Yeah, no kidding. Well, I want to ask you a different question, and that is, how many of you know somebody who, whenever you're around them, or whenever anybody's around them, social setting or whatever, they are just loud and overbearing, and it's just, how many of you know somebody like that? Don't point at me, just raise your hand if you know somebody like that. Yeah. It's just no matter who you are, no matter if somebody else is trying to get into the conversation or share their point of view, they have something to say about everything, and they're going to say it, and they're going to be loud about it, and on and on and on they go. They may attract a big crowd around them. When I was in high school, there were two very, very popular girls. Very popular. They were very pretty, they were very popular. One of them was very loud, and she always had a whole bunch of people around her, and she was the center of attention, and her voice just kept projecting, and it kind of like drained the energy out of you just being around her, but everybody wanted to be around her. Then there was the other girl, equally as stunning, and she would attract a crowd as well. But what was interesting was how she could keep everyone's attention because she spoke so softly, so quietly, that everybody had to listen and draw close. Wow. That's power, isn't it? The whisper that got their attention. That was pretty slick, I think. Pretty slick stuff. Well, I bring that up because I want to share a story with you that at first you're going to think, what's the connection? But I think you'll see it. How many of you in here are old enough to remember 45 records? How many of you have never heard a 45 record being played? You probably never heard Groucho Marx either. When I was a teenager, 45 records you could buy for about 88 cents, unless they went on sale for 69. And all of those rock and roll groups from the 50s and 60s, all their music came out on 45 records, and everybody would buy those, collect those, have a stack of those. You'd number them. You'd have a list. You'd have a party and bring out the record player, and you'd put those on, and everybody would have a great time listening to Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly. Yeah, okay. His staccato kind of voice. How about the Four Seasons? Yeah. Yeah. And then there was, Eddie Cochran. Eddie Cochran? Summertime Blues? Remember all of those? Yeah. Chuck Berry, going to Memphis. Remember all those? I do. Yeah. And even some of that good bluesy kind of music. It was a great time to listen to all that wonderful stuff. And I was doing a little research the other day, and I discovered that back then there was a blues singer named Jimmy Reed. I don't know if you remember Jimmy Reed or not. Bluesy kind of singer, good stuff. And I discovered in reading this article about him that when he would go into the recording studio, he was so much into the beat of the music and playing his guitar and keeping just into the music itself that he would forget the words to his own songs that he had written. And they would have trouble recording his music. He'd be so into the playing and the beat, he'd forget the words. So they brought his wife in, and she would sit next to him on a stool while he's doing his recording. And in advance of every line, she'd whisper that line into his ear. And then he'd sing it, and she'd whisper the next one, and he'd sing it. And they say that on some of his old records, if you listen very closely under headphones, you can hear her voice whispering the lines ahead of him singing those. Isn't that incredible? That's pretty neat. As long as she's whispering the right lines. It works really good. Jesus said, "Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will return again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, you may be also. You know the way to where I'm going. But in a short while, I'll be with you no longer. But I will send the Holy Spirit, the Comforter, to remind you of all I have taught you. Let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me." At this point in his life, Jesus is preparing for his own death. He knows it's imminent. It's coming very soon. So he sits his disciples down and he speaks those words to them, telling them that even though I am going to be gone, I am going to send what? The Comforter. And the Comforter is what? The Holy Spirit. I will send the Holy Spirit. Now, we have watched preachers on TV, and we have heard many sermons in other places and read books about the power of the Holy Spirit. How the Holy Spirit descended down upon those gathered in the upper room in the book of Acts, and tongues of fire appeared on their heads, and they started speaking. And as they spoke, people standing by would hear them in their own languages. The power of the Holy Spirit. Pretty miraculous stuff, isn't it? We hear about in those sermons and in those stories, we hear about how the Holy Spirit works to miraculously heal people. And I don't doubt that. Many of you have your own stories of being healed miraculously by the Holy Spirit. We read where Paul says the Holy Spirit, one of the gifts of the Spirit is speaking in tongues. It happens.